guys, Joe here. A little bit of a change up this time round. I have a friend here, and guess what she's called? Yep, Joe. And we're just going to wing it. We're just going to have a coffee and a chat and see how it goes. May not even upload this. We may upload it, whatever happens. But when me and Joe get on the phone, it starts off with, hi, how you doing, yada, yada, yada. And then before the end of the conversation, we've gone into some really deep subjects and really processed and talked about current times and consciousness and etc, etc. And Joe's been on quite a long journey of consciousness, a lot longer than I have, and delved in. And Joe's been a devout Christian, so I kind of want to touch on the Christianity and why she left the Christianity. She's a holistic healer.
Therapist, healer, yeah.
Holistic therapist. She's got a website. What's it called?
Oh, I've got Instagram. It's a sound state of mind.
Right, okay, sound state of mind. So I'll pop that in the link when I upload. And you're also a coach as well, aren't you? So
Yes.
yeah, so, and we both got into, so we met back in 2020 when all this shit kicked off, and we've just kind of like, we met other people as well, and people have gone their separate ways, but me and Joe have kind of carried on with the friendship. And yeah, we have disagreements. We had quite a big one last night. We went out with something to eat, and I was trying to get a point across, and she wasn't quite getting my point, and I got frustrated, and she was getting frustrated. So it kind of like in the middle of the pub, I went, stop me, and you know, and she was like, ugh, you know, and people looked at us, but then I was able to explain, and then we kind of just like talked it out. But that's what's great when me and Joe have conversations, because we both fire off one another's ideas and theories, and it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and we just delve. So we'll see how this goes if we get to that point. And where was I going with that? So we're talking about your sound healing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, where we met. So everybody went off in their own different directions, and me and Joe remained friends. And we both came across archaics at pretty much exactly the same time, didn't we? So I rang Joe, or she rang me. I think I rang you and said, oh my God, have you seen Alpha Debbie's new video regarding the simulation? I've watched it already. So we've both been really hammering the archaic stuff. We're a little bit different in, I enjoy delving into the darker side of things, like the Satanism. And again, we kind of like had loggerheads when I mentioned that we live in a satanic world, and you were kind of like, you're very opposed about, I think it's the word. And again, what I'm trying to get across is everything's been inverted. So I want to talk about Joe's Christianity and why she left. I have my own views on religion. I've never read the Bible because of my views of religion, but listening to Jason, and we are in Revelations right now, and we are in Genesis, and of course Gnosticism, and there's a whole history behind the actual Bible, but which is the real Bible. So yeah, fire away, Joe. Let's just have a chat. Yeah. Talk about your journey.
Okay. Well, if we're talking about Christianity, when I was a little girl, I decided to go to church, the Salvation Army. So it wasn't church. Salvation Army is a bit different. It's a bit singy. It's a bit more upbeat. And I really enjoyed it. You know, playing the tambourine, and learnt to play the cornet. And so it was a really, really good experience. Teenager, dropped out completely, and then it wasn't until I had my children, my first child, that I decided, you know what, I might go back. And it happened, a woman I was working with, she was quite devout, and she used to go to a Baptist church, and we used to have these conversations at work, and I'd be saying, yeah, but in the Old Testament it says this, and in the New Testament it says this, it's all contradictory, and blah blah. So this went on for months and months and months, and she said, you know what, I can't answer your questions, come to the church. That's the way to get you.
Absolutely. yeah.
So I went to the church, and as I said, it was a Baptist church, and the preacher was an American guy, and He was great, actually. He really knew how to speak. He was a fantastic orator. So yeah, hooked. I really enjoyed listening to his sermons. Now, I didn't agree with everything he said, as you know what I'm like.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was a really interesting to go. So I went for years. My children got named there because we didn't do baptisms and stuff. And then he left. And when he left, it was like, the new preachers came and they weren't the same. There was the different dynamics. So it sort of like left a space then to start questioning, to really question. I kept saying, are you not going to become, a member of the, whatever it is, the church, whatever they call it? I can't remember now. And I was like, I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm 100% there. And then I ended up leaving the Baptist church and going back to the Salvation Army. And I knew people there, but it was because it was very children orientated. They had stuff going on for the kids, and it was really good. And then I just did loads. I went to LL Ministries every month for 2 years, spending a weekend there, really delving into different aspects of the Bible and just different things. That was a really good experience, but I was still never made that commitment, that 100% commitment.
So there was something internal that you knew that something wasn't quite right. This is why I've never, because I've touched on Buddhism, and of course as you know, I've touched on the Satanism. But I've always been, and this is going to lead quite nicely into the conversation we had last night about the mind control and stuff. So I've always been really reluctant to follow one doctrine. And the Buddhist philosophy is a beautiful, peaceful philosophy. Same with Hinduism, yada, yada, yada. But I'll touch on things, but I've never really wanted to be indoctrined into a way of thinking. Of course, we now know that we actually, all our lives have been indoctrined into a way of thinking. But that's a whole other subject which we're going to lead on to now. And I've always had that feeling that, well, no, I don't want to follow that because I don't want to be told. That's how I'm to think, basically. So did you join the church to be part of a community? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was definitely part of it.
Yeah.
And even that wasn't quite what I imagined it to be. It was more cliquey. So there was a lot of established little groups, and it was very difficult to break into these cliques.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, at one time I was even sat on the management board, and I still felt like an outsider.
Yeah, but you probably felt like an outsider because you weren't intrinsically engaged with it, because you knew something just wasn't quite right.
Possibly.
So, because again, it's all about the informed field and the energy fields that we give off, etc., etc. So when did you start getting into all the consciousness and learning about and understanding consciousness and what that actually means?
So I think at this point I come out of the church, and I definitely had. And me and my friend, we used to. So we still sort of, I'd say, believed in the Bible. There's still stuff in the Bible that resonated with us.
Yeah.
So we sort of got our little group together, and we started doing like a bit like house services. I don't know.
Where you're reading the Bible, I'm probably doing Ouija boards. I've done Ouija boards before now.
Yeah. But sort of like just talking about different parts of the Bible. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I'm just going to just then. Go on.
What was I saying? Oh, yeah, so. And then it sort of all started falling apart, and my friend, she said, I don't want to, I'm sick of being in a box. I don't want to be in a box anymore. I feel like I've been, contained in this box.
Yeah.
Because she was all very, she'd been definitely into the alternative side, the Wicca, the witches, and nature. She's definitely.
Sorry, guys, I'm just adjusting the screen. But go on. Yes.
Yeah. So that's when we sort of started looking back into, the crystals, nature, trees, all the natural side of it.
Yeah.
And then I was sort of exploring coaching. And I don't like doing everything, rigidly.
Yeah.
I'm more like a conversationalist.
Yeah.
So I came across this conversational coaching course, and I sort of like started looking into it. And the coaching I'd looked at previously had always been, a set of tools. You do this, if they say this, you follow SMART or whatever the acronym was. And I was like, oh no, what if I miss that step out? And if I, and it would just prey on my mind, and I couldn't do the coaching properly. So when I came across this conversational coaching, it was like, yes, that really suits me. And during that time, I came across a guy called Sydney Banks, an old welder from Scotland who died maybe 2009. And he brought about 3 principles of mind, consciousness and thought. So that's when I started looking down that route. What is thought, what is mind, what is consciousness. So it really explored that. And then even that wasn't quite everything. So then I ended up looking at non-duality and the consciousness only model. So I stuck with that for a while. It's probably 2 or 3 years before 2020. Yeah.
And as you're talking, what's really interesting is me and Joe have had completely different backgrounds, yet we've still ended up at the same spot with the simulation theory. And what's really interesting about that is what's interesting about that is what Jason says about we will bring people into our reality based on the informed field that we put out. But I kind of want to talk about what we were discussing last night and the journey and how, so the AI element of it, and how me and Joe have both been very, very rigid about the whole mind control element of this. And, when 2020 hit, staying in your houses and wearing masks, and we're like, no, don't think so. And Yuval Harari came out with this, people think that they have free will and actually they don't. And when I first heard that, it really got my back up. But my whole perception is beginning to change around that and actually accept that maybe we don't have free will. And that's what set Joe off last night, because she was like, well, what's the point if we don't have free will? We can't create anything. We may as well just sit back and do nothing and yada, yada, yada. And where I was coming from with it, I don't mean we don't have free will regarding Johnson telling us that we've got to stay in our houses. What I mean is we don't have free will regarding the path that we take. And what really opened my eyes was when Logan did my astrology reading, and I was already on the path of the astrology. And if we're going off, and I've gone off on a bit in a tangent, and my own videos I tend to go off on a bit of a tangent, and it's actually really difficult for me this, having somebody here with me, because when I'm on my own I can talk quite freely about what I want, but with having someone else here, it's a little, I've got to I don't know, I'm just going off on one like I usually do. You guys know what I'm like by now. But where I've come from, especially since watching the AI and Archons and the Black Goo presentation from the scientist, can't remember his name, was that I've actually come to accept that maybe we are owned and controlled by AI, and we don't actually have the free will that we think we've got. Whereas Joe really didn't resonate with that at all, did you?
It's a difficult one. I think just looking at just how we are anyway, just our own bodies, we've got microsystems and viruses and bacteria and everything. The whole world's going on inside of us.
Yeah.
Is that controlling us?
Absolutely. And what I was so when we were talking about, because of course Jason talks about we are creators, those of us on this journey, we know that we are creators, we can manifest, and we are using magic when we do it. So I had to get that little bit dark element in there about the magic. Sorry, Joe, I had to do it.
It's good magic as well.
Yeah, exactly, black and white magic. So where I was coming from with the whole control thing and still being able to manifest, and she really challenged me last night to actually delve into, because I tend to say flippant things, oh, we're controlled. And Joe's the kind of person, well, what do you mean by that? Exactly, what do you mean? So then I have to really go into what I mean. And that's how I got into the whole Satanism thing, because when I said we live in a Satanist society, she went, well, what does that actually mean? And I went, I don't actually know. So I just looked at Dick. So she challenges me to really delve into. And she's like, well, Jason says we can create because we are creators. And yes, indeed, we are. So we kind of got onto, I started to break it down to this being a computer game, and when you are a character in a computer game, so basically our lives are predestined, and you don't like the word predestined because to you predestined is there's just one destination, and that's how you perceived it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas where I was thinking, we've got different destinations that we can go down based on what decisions we make. So a little bit like the butterfly effect, and there's various films out there like Sliding Doors. Depending on what decision she made would determine the life that she went into.
But that's like potentiality, isn't it? That's like every time we make a decision, or every time we have to make a decision, there is endless possibilities.
Yes, and how we got onto the whole, and where the little bit of conflict came from last night was I was saying we are coded, and Joe was saying, well, if we're coded, how can we be creators? And that's when I started to break it down in my own mind and think, well, think about it, it's a computer game, there's coding in that computer game, and we play a character in that computer game, and there are certain fixed elements of that computer game, but depending on whatever decision you make, or if you break through something, you go up a level. And that's how I kind of came to the conclusion of accepting that we are coded, but we can still be creators at the same time. But we've got different paths that we could potentially go down, because I watched a film the other night, and I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically this guy, he opened a portal, and when he looked through that portal and entered that portal, it was him and his wife, but living an absolutely completely different life. They were affluent, they had a baby, they lived in a big house, the swimming pool, yada, yada, yada. And then he went through another portal and he saw another aspect of his life. So I think you kind of, once we got over the whole conflict, you got what I was trying to say about
terminology.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's the word magic. It's the terminology, like the term, because the word control. Nobody wants to think that they're controlled. Of course they don't. Because we're here where we are now because we won't be controlled, or we don't.
It is interesting though, isn't it? Because people, Jason and lots of spiritual teachers, they say you can create your own life.
Yeah.
So those potentialities are all there. So what makes us choose a particular one at a particular time? Then maybe that's where the control could come in.
Maybe, yeah. So go on, expand.
So like
because
habits. So you have your typical way of doing something. Your habitual way. When that happens, your go-to is to do such and such thing. So even though the world's your oyster, all the potentialities are there. And this is why a lot of people say the law of attraction doesn't work, because they're doing. So things are there for you to take, or for you to go down that avenue, that route. So why don't you? Why do we not do that?
Maybe I've now plugged the microphone in, guys, so the sound will have changed. I just noticed that the microphone wasn't plugged in. That could be AIX putting things in the way, and also, but what I've come to in a stand and actually accept is that we are controlled by our coding. And yes, take on board what you say regarding, depending on what route. But let me so for example, when I had my astrology reading done, and Logan was saying, you're into mysticism and the occult and yada yada yada, and you're going to start wanting to get this information out by doing videos or blogs or whatever you enjoy writing, yada yada yada. And I was like, well, I'm actually already on that path. So that was a predestination of my timeline. I was on that timeline at that time that I was supposed to be on that timeline. Now, you've been having difficulty selling your house. You've been having roadblocks selling your house, haven't you?
Yeah, but sorry, just going back to what you were saying. So your reading by Logan was done based on the cards you drew at that time?
No,
did you draw, or was it where?
The astrology, and of course he brings in cards.
The tarot, yeah.
Yeah, it brings in different things, but my chart is obviously, the chart is a fixed. From what I understand about astrology, it's fixed.
Your birth chart?
My birth chart, my sun chart, it's fixed. So obviously I've got nothing to compare with, because I've never had a reading done before, because I've never really been a believer of astrology. Believe it or not, I believe in paranormal and things like that, but I've never really, because I think it's from the old Russell Grant days, reading the Sunday paper, and I'm like, well, every Scorpio is going to be. So yes, I do think there are elements of, and I don't know what words, I know this churns you up a bit to use the word predestined, but I believe that we've got coding, and depending on the choices that we make will send us down a certain path. But if our time isn't right to go down that path, i.e. you selling your house, roadblocks will be put in the way, because it's not the right time.
But are we putting our own roadblocks in the way?
Maybe, because I've done a video on this as well, guys, regarding the tarot reading, the energy field that we put out. So when I moved here, it was bam, 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 but I knew it was the right thing to do. It felt right. So it happened. So I created it to happen.
Yeah. And you were in a position where you really didn't want to stay where you were any longer. You've really, whereas I'm in a bit of a different position. I'm a bit more like, is it the right time anyway?
So that's interesting. So is it roadblocks that are being put out by the system because it's not our time, or is it our informed energy field that are actually putting those roadblocks?
Yeah, I prefer that.
I know you do. I know you do. But equally, because I've gone down the whole nanobot route, and I've kind of accepted the fact that we have got organisms in us, potentially alien technology, which I know is really far out there for a lot of people. I don't think people who are watching this be out there, but
by alien technology, you just mean, what do you mean?
Technology that we can't explain.
Not natural.
Not natural, yeah. But are aliens natural? They're part of this ecosystem if they're living underground. What do we call? So if you talk about Jason talking about the Anunnakis and the Anunas, if we saw an Anuna come out, and I think I could be wrong with this, but I think he describes it as being translucent skin, blue-eyed. But if we saw someone like that walk past, we'd call them an alien. But in actual fact, they're human like we are. They just look different. So again, it's perception, isn't it? How we perceive something to be. And we've also got this idea of what an alien looks like because of what's been put into our minds from the media.
But I suppose alien can be natural or made. And then if you go to the frequency side of it,
go on, expand.
Where are we then? If everything's frequencies, nothing's solid, we're just a whole bunch of interacting fields, aren't we?
Yeah.
Wave fields.
And we were actually talking about that this morning, because I listened to a podcast, and Joe was listening to it before we got on here. But I think the podcast is Magic 16, I think it was called. I can't remember. I'll post it in the comment box. And we were talking about how resistant we've been with this whole technology that's rolling out, the transhumanism. And I used to do digital artwork, And I was always, even when I was creating the digital artwork, I was like, it's not me doing it, it's the computer doing it. But we were having a conversation this morning about, is it the computer doing it, or is it my energy field? Sorry, computer's just gone off, gone to sleep. Put the right password in. Yeah, so when I'm creating that piece of artwork on Photoshop, I'm just playing around with the tools and then something gets created. Was it the tool, or was it an external force that I wasn't aware of that was actually encouraging me to create that? Because nothing exists without consciousness and without the thought process first off. So a table doesn't exist until it exists in someone's mind. So I stopped doing the digital artwork because I got tired of being on the computer, and it didn't feel I didn't feel like I was being naturally creative. I didn't feel like it was coming from my creativity. But in actual fact, when we think about the consciousness, everything starts off as consciousness. So, and then that led on to AI having consciousness and being sentient. And excuse me, and they're discussing that in this podcast. And I was given a book years ago called The Spiritual Brain, and it actually talks about, could we make computers sentient? And they've also been pushing that out into the narratives of certain programs. Like, I can't remember what it was a vampire program. They were trying to put consciousness into an artificial being that they've created. So when we are using artificial intelligence, i.e. computers, tools which make our life easier, is it the technology, or is it our consciousness that is manipulating whatever's created?
I suppose if you look at it as, like, going back to your artwork, look at it as tools to help you to produce something. You have to have a starting point, don't you?
Yeah.
And then maybe by using those tools, you have effects that you wouldn't typically have thought of, but the tools are there to help you to create those types of effects and enhance your initial idea.
But what if it didn't start off with a conscious idea? Because quite often my artwork didn't start off with a conscious idea. I was basically sat there and I started, and then just whatever happened, and then I'm like, yeah, I like that, or I don't like that.
But that happens in real life too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So when an artist is starting off with something,
or an author,
and then exactly, so where are those ideas being plucked from? So we're really resistant about artificial intelligence. I know I have been up until this point, and that I am getting to the level of acceptance, and don't get me wrong, I'm not getting to the level of acceptance regarding the social credit system and all that element of it, but I am becoming more acceptance of seeing something like, let's say for example, social media as a tool, Facebook as a tool. And I was listening to Logan and Jordan from Decode Your Reality and What About Crypto, and they were actually discussing how people are really resistant, hate YouTube, blah, blah, blah. And they were saying, well, actually, YouTube is enabling us to put this content out there, and people learn from it. And Jordan, when I learned how to change a tyre by watching a video on YouTube.
I think it's a lot of it's the unknown, isn't it? It's like they're harvesting our information, they're harvesting our intuition, thoughts, creativity. That's all being stored somewhere.
But were they doing it before social media anyway? Were they already doing that?
Yeah, but obviously at a lot less of a... They didn't have the capacity, did they, to hold all the data and the information. It's the hiddenness, isn't it? It's they're not upfront about what they're doing, so that leaves a fear with us because we don't know what's actually going on, what their end game is, what's you know, like I said, it's great. You know, you use your credit card and just, you know, put it over a device instead of having to faff around getting your change out. That's not the problem. The problem is, where is it leading to?
Exactly. But then we started touching on the conversation of, is it really nefarious? Do we really know if it's actually nefarious? Because, as Jason has stated in his videos, they don't tell us what their plans are. So, are they just putting out this fear-based propaganda? Because he believes that 2030 is not going to happen. He believes it's a psyop. Whereas we can see things rolling out. I left Bolton because I could see the whole smart city agenda rolling out, and I was like, I'm out of here. See ya, before they shut all the roads off and lock us in. But
there's a vagueness about it, though.
Yeah. So, but I guess where I'm coming from is, do we really know? You know, because a lot of us, we've never heard of Klaus Schwab and the WEF before 2020, you know? Where'd they come from all of a sudden? And then everybody's keyboard warriors and we're all trying to wake people up. And again, it's all about the energy harvesting and keeping everybody in a low vibration. So I think you came to this conclusion before I did about, you were stepping back before I was. And I think both of us finding Jason's really helped us with because I'm a completely different person to when you first met me. I'm actually back to who I used to be. Yeah. But when me and Joe first met, I was in a very, very fear-based state, wasn't I?
Yeah.
And she actually said to me on the phone, she went, "Who's this?" It was a few days ago, and she's completely different, you know. So I've stepped away from the fear-based propaganda because I'm recognising, and I also have a better understanding of consciousness and manifestation. So if they're putting stuff out there for us to share, we're actually bringing it into our own reality.
And that takes me back to Tom Barnett. It's an offer.
Yeah, exactly. It's
making an offer.
Exactly. So we had this conversation because I sent Joe that Archon's Black Goo and AI video, and she rang me and she went, "What have you sent me? It's horrible." And I went, "Actually, no, I find it really empowering." Because knowing that, the potentiality of me having this, or us, all of us, having this technology inside of us, I can go, I don't contract with it. So when I'm got the little devil on one side and the angel on the other about buying a shitload of chocolate, because I don't just buy one bar, you know, or eating junk food or whatever it may be, now that I perceive that it might be the little devil on my shoulder that is trying to steer me down the wrong direction, I've now got the power to go, no, actually, you're not having my mind. And I got to that point after reading that Secret Societies book, when I learned about they control both sides of the narrative. I was like, no, you're not having my mind.
There's a definite shift there.
Definite. Yeah. So all this stuff that I'm finding out, it's actually empowering me. And I said that to Joe. It's empowering to know this stuff, because we can then take control of it and decide what it then comes down to we being able to make a decision and taking a different path and going down a different code. I had to get that in. I always had to get that in.
To a different or the same destination.
Or the same destination. Exactly, because here's another thing that we touched on last night. So our paths might go down a different road, but would we have always, and we're never going to be able to answer this, but would we have always ended up in that destination? You know, did it take 2020 and my mum passing away for me to sell up and move here? Would I have been here anyway, but at a later time? Because, you know, with the astrology, they say that you are where you're meant to be.
I don't know.
None of us know.
To think about that.
Yeah, none of us know. They're just massive, massive questions. So what else can we talk about? Or has this gone on long enough? If people are still here with us, you might be bored to death by now.
No, I still think though there's, and you could call it programming, that when you the when you're born is the astrology, isn't it? That an influence is like a blueprint on the sky.
It's a good word, that, actually, blueprint.
Where you know, that is you. That is taken information. That's information that is embedded in you.
Yeah.
But then you've got so many other factors that contribute. So if I'd have been born in your family, would I be like I am now?
What's interesting about that is it goes back to what I said about both you and I. We've both had completely different backgrounds, yet we've both ended up at this point. So I'm of the belief that no matter where you're born, what you're born into, if that is your destination, you will get there regardless, because both you and I have broke away from because none of my family think the way that I think, and I don't know where my critical thinking and me looking outside the box and has actually come from, and likewise with you. So I think no matter what, where you're born, if that's your path, that's your path. Because it's like Logan touches on this. He says, you know, we're born into families. How does he word it? So, we're born in, we're placed into a family.
Or we choose.
Yeah, that's another element of it. You know, because I often ask the question. I often ask the question: how can I be so different from my family and friends? You know, what was it that made me start to go down a different route? I can actually answer that question. It was my ex-boyfriend. We used to have these far out conversations, and then he introduced me to the whole 9/11, and that was it. I was down the rabbit hole.
But you've mentioned in the past that you've not gone down some rabbit holes because it's just not affected you. It's not, you know, been important in your life at that point. So, going down certain rabbit holes, is that predestined?
Well, Logan said to me about my charts, he said, you have an interest in the occult and you will look at the occult because you have no choice, because you've got Rahu in your charts. And Rahu's like, I think, the black sun, or it's a darker element to your personality. He said you enjoy looking at the dark elements of this life, this reality.
And you all, well, since I've known you, you've always steered towards that.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to know if that's an overriding. Would that override other things? You know, different astrological determinants.
Explain, I'm not quite understanding.
So in your childhood, would you have been interested in that sort of thing?
From what I remember I don't really remember an awful lot about my childhood, which is interesting. I don't remember being different to other kids.
So when do you remember wanting to look into things?
I was in my 30s. And in actual fact, I've always been into deeper conversation. Like I lived with someone in Essex for 3 years, and I found him really boring because I could never get any depth out of him.
Hope he's not watching.
I hope so as well. Sorry if you are watching. I got on better with his brother, because his brother, I was able to have some really deep. So I've always had an interest in philosophy and really delving into the deeper elements of.
I wonder if that's the connection with people who are on this path.
Yeah, because we're open-minded and we're looking to go where most don't want to go or are unable to go. Like like my mum used to say to me, she'd say, you know, she'd read my posts on Facebook and she'd go, "You're so intelligent, Jo, I'm really proud of you." And she had an interest in it, but she was influenced by whichever partner she was with at the time. So when I introduced 9/11 to her, she was like, "Yeah, I see what you mean." And then a partner at the time came along and went, "Oh, it's bullshit, it's crap."
And that was it.
And that was it. She didn't want to know about it any more than that. So I think there was an element of interest there, but she was so frightened of being an outcast and not fitting in that she never. Whereas I think the likes of you and I are a little bit more ballsy, aren't we, when we speak our minds and we can't help but open our gobs. Gets us into trouble sometimes. You know, rubs people the wrong way because.
I know, it shouldn't really, should it?
But it does, you know. But anyway, we before we knock off, I think we've been on quite a while now, and you know we've been on 40 minutes. This is the longest video I've actually ever done.
And shortest conversation.
And I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll pop Jo's Instagram.
It's very small.
Yeah, well, listen, we're both like small fry, you know. This is just a bit of fun. We just thought to ourselves, we have these really good conversations, why not put it on video? It's just fun, innit? And this is something else that, you know, I am actually bracing the AI, because here I am sat here talking to a bunch of people that I don't know and will never meet again, and actually talking about my thoughts. And that's another interesting thing about social media. And I was thinking about this the other day, about how we so freely put ourselves out there to a bunch of strangers. I remember when I was doing the artwork, I went around my house, showing my house, and somebody messaged me and went, "Don't be doing that. You might get some kind of freaky stalker knocking on your door." And I was like, yeah, nah, it's not going to happen. But you don't know who you're meeting. You know, you don't know who's watching you. Because I used
Hence the harvesting of data.
But even like, I remember I used to do videos beforehand. I'm not new to the whole video thing because I was an entrepreneur and I was doing all these courses about how to, you know, social media, and it was all about doing the videos. I remember this one guy, he wrote to me and he went, "I just watch your lips. I just like watching your lips move." And I was like, freak. Sorry if anybody's watching my lips move. But anyway, on that note, have you got anything that you'd like to add before switch off?
No, I just, we just have really good conversations, and it's nice to chat.
Absolutely. And Jo's going to be getting a YouTube channel set up. Don't know how's it going to go.
Yeah, I'm just looking to put, instead of just advertising business and stuff, just to put some stuff out about what I'm doing at the moment, what I'm immersing myself in.
Are you going to do what I do? Talk about things?
Probably would be specific thing rather than a chat. It'll be, I don't know, like I'm thinking I've done the Gabriel method, and I'm going to revisit that, so maybe about my day-to-day journey.
Just to, so like vlogging. I hate that word. I hate the word blog. I hate the word vlog.
Embrace.
Well, I'm trying to, but when I first started, because I do have a blog, and when I started doing the videos, I kind of abandoned the writing because I haven't got the time to do both. And I think people are visual, so they prefer to watch video anyway. But I just hate the word blog, and I kind of described it as it's dumbing down and destroying the language. And again, it all comes down to the word magic and the dumbing down. And anyway, that's a whole other subject. So if you've got this far, thank you. Would be lovely to have feedback, comments, etc., and I'll speak to you all soon. Speak to you soon, guys. Bye. And I'll be on my own next time. But I've got somebody coming next week. We might be doing another video then. See you later. Bye. It's fun.